All right, Mr. Kirchhoff coming to you live from AwYeah Comics,
Woo!
the greatest comic book shop, definitely in Muncie. And I've not been to them all in Indiana, but there's no way they can top this.
I would say at least East Central Indiana.
East Central
not
Indiana.
The Midwest.
I always call myself the comic book teacher of East Central Indiana. So
Okay.
this is the comic book shop of East Central Indiana.
There you go.
Okay, so sad news. I'm dealing with a cold and in no condition of teaching. Yeah. Get out of there. So, I have called in the ultimate ringer for writing instruction, Miss Christy Blanche, who is not only the owner and operator of this Dr. Christy Blanche. When they get that doctor title, they get such an ego. Anyway, so she is the owner and operator of this wonderful store, which you definitely should visit. You'll probably even run into me here sometimes.
Probably. He's here a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, not very much. He's here a lot.
Okay. So, but Dr. Blanche, I said at that time, Dr. Blanche is a published writer and very experienced and far more capable of giving you what you need to know about writing than I am. Yeah, I had a few A's on papers in my day.
Pretty smart guy here.
Yeah. So, Dr. Blanche, we have been talking about fantasy reading in our classroom, and obviously fantasy text is an engaging piece of reading, but we've also wanted to take on the challenge ourselves a little bit and do some fantasy writing, and that's what we're going to be doing with this module. So the first thing I want to ask you, and this is something that's come up in all of our writing units, is to find a mentor text. So could you talk to us a little bit about maybe the importance of a mentor text, something that's given you some inspiration, or maybe a particular mentor text you've used for any kind of writing?
Yes. The Hobbit is a it's always had a big influence on me. Lord of the Rings also, but The Hobbit is where it started. My parents didn't have me read it, but they introduced me to that. Actually through the movies first, the animated ones. But that, to me, it just opened up so many avenues of, it's like, oh my gosh, you can do this, and mental pictures. And they always have, the map in there, which, it made you, I don't know, it just made you feel closer to it. That's huge. Obviously, Game of Thrones is for anything, but it's a little past 5th grade, maybe.
Yes. We're not encouraging 5th graders to read that.
No, don't read it. Read The Hobbit, though, because it's amazing. The Narnia books are fun. Any of the, Wrinkle in Time is one that the movie just came out. It is amazing. So the best way to become a good writer is to read and read and read. And there's no end of what you can read. So, but having that one text that you can go back to is really important. That gives you inspiration. And another one of mine is, it's a comic book, which I love. Duh. But it's The Saga of the Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. And it is one of the most amazing stories, much less how they're using the pictures and words in conjunction with each other. It's amazing. That's another one, and that's big world building too. So.
And reading a good mentor text is not about stealing ideas from another author. It's looking for that spark, and especially if you're reading from a text that fits the genre that you're writing from, it might be a small little detail that gives you that inspiration or that sparks an idea for you, or maybe it's song lyrics or whatever. I remembered something that I was trying to write when I tried to write a comic book for myself, just to go along with what we're doing in a comic book club. But I got hung up on a title of a song that I couldn't get out of my head that resonated with me. So it can be any number of things that resonates with you.
Oh yeah, I listen to a lot of Electric Light Orchestra, and I get so many ideas from that. All of a sudden, I'll just be listening to a song I've listened to over and over and over, and then it just hits at the right time, and you're like, oh, that would be great. That's a great title for a book, and then all the everything starts going from there. So it can be you can find inspiration anywhere, but having those texts that you can go back to for your inspiration, and again, it isn't stealing an idea. No. It's getting inspiration.
Yes.
I was writing one series, and everybody had told me it was similar to Breaking Bad. So I did not watch Breaking Bad because I didn't want to subconsciously steal any ideas, which again, no one should watch in 5th grade either.
We're giving you horrible mentor texts.
Terrible mentor texts. So I did not watch it until I was done with my story. Then I went back and watched it afterwards, and I was like, it really wasn't going to have much crossover, and it's really well written. So I kind of wish I had seen, watched it. So yeah, it's just getting inspiration, and they would, all of the authors that you would read that would give you that inspiration, that would really they want to share, so.
Okay, so the first key step to any good writing piece is find a good mentor text.
Yes.
Next step, and next thing we've been talking about this in my room and other classrooms. If you've not gotten into the fantasy unit with Lucy Calkins, this is where everything really starts, and that's setting and world building. And when it comes to fantasy, we've extended beyond, narrative fiction writing. We've written some personal narratives ourselves, but that was usually about a small event in one location. Now we're entering a fantasy world, and there are these big, vast worlds that you can lose yourself. It's almost like the setting becomes a character itself.
It does.
So can you talk to us a little bit about setting and world building? I mean, as fascinating as it is, it sounds like a really tough challenge to take on.
It is a tough challenge because when you're creating an entire new world, you have to create places that aren't even in the story. So you can't just say, okay, well, this takes place in Muncie, Indiana, and so I'm only going to have this Muncie, Indiana on there, because we go more places than just Muncie. We go on vacation, we go here and we go here, which all is in the story of your life. So you have to think ahead, and you have to, you have to plan out. You have to think about what kind of animals live there, what kind of people live there, what kind, is it a desert, everything isn't, as much as I love Star Wars, and I love Star Wars, it's like there aren't just Star Wars. We usually don't have just desert planets or ice planets or swamp planets. Usually we have, here's a swamp, here's this, here's that. We're talking earlier about The Princess Bride. They had the swamp, with the ROUSS's.
Rodents of unusual size.
ROUSS's, yes. So it's like that. They had to write that in there because it was not just that. So you really have to do a lot of world building. Now, you don't have to go overboard. I know a lot of fantasy writers, when I have read a lot about them because they fascinate me, especially Tolkien. But there's so much more to their worlds than what they even put in the book. It's kind of like when they say, when you're creating a new character, fill out a character sheet. Know what the person's favorite food is, favorite movie, what they would do in certain situations. All those may not come up in the story, but you know them. So knowing where your story takes place is very important. And there's so many different aspects of building a world. It also will give you inspiration to maybe for a new story, story arc. It's like, oh wait, if I put this desert over here and they visit it and they meet these animals, and it's very intimidating, but it's so cool because you get to create a whole new everything. You have people creating new languages, which is just super fun, and just all of these different parts, and it makes you just realize how different culture is and for different things. And I'm also trained in anthropology, which is helpful because I know all of these about culture and how this changes this and that changes this, and things that factor into it. And it's just it's a building a world is amazing. So enjoy it, have fun with it, and it's fantasy. So put fun things in it. Put things in that you'd like to see.
And something interesting that I picked up of what you said right there is, you're looking at it as you build this vast world. You're seeing all the stories that could occur. Maybe you don't tell that story right away because eventually your characters have to get there before you can tell that story. And maybe it's not even a big story to tell. Maybe it's just a small moment. And you bring up Princess Bride when they go to the fire swamp. That's not a very long scene, and it's not a very significant setting. It just is part of the world, and it just shows how expansive this world is. So that's pretty interesting. But you brought up character. You jumped ahead of me a little bit. So now we're going character. Now, when we're making our character. This is 3, though? This is 3. So we did find a good mentor text.
I'm not calling it jumping ahead. I'm calling it segueing.
Transition. Okay.
Transition.
So we find a good mentor text, build your world, and find little stories throughout the different parts of the world. And now we got to talk about building a character. Now, something that we've talked about, at least in my classroom, when it comes to, putting together your character in a fantasy story, is you want to make sure they're not an expert. You have to learn with the character as you move with them. So leaving plenty of room for them to fail, for conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk to us a little bit about some character development? You've written some stories, so you've created characters yourself.
Character development is fun and it's intimidating because, again, you want to know this person like it's your main characters. You want to know them like they're your best friend, except you need to know more about them than it would because you have to know how they're going to, react when they meet a new person. Do they like dogs? Do they like cats? Do they like this food? Do they like that food? And it's just but it's so much fun because you get to create it. So sometimes if I'm creating a character that I really like, then I create them like this would be my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I'll people that in my life I'll think, oh, I need this character. I met this person that was kind of like this, and so you kind of can base it on that of those characters. But you really, just like with world building, you have to know your character so well. Because you never know what's going to happen. And when you're writing doesn't always go as planned. Sometimes your characters just will take a left turn. And when you think you know your characters really well, and then all of a sudden they'll do something, and you realize you're writing it, but you're like, wait, I didn't think that character was going to do that. So it's like that's something you just really have to know, but your characters will surprise you, which is always fun. But write down, just all sorts of questions about your characters. Talk about their parents, if they have brothers and sisters, if they had dogs, if they had, what their education is, where they lived, if they've moved a lot, what's their favorite ice cream, who's their best friend, what's one of the saddest moments, what are they scared of, what, all of these things. And by knowing that, if you're talking about going into the fire swamp, you know how your character is going to act if they run into something. And you also could say, oh, well, this character is really scared of spiders, so let's have them go into, say, like in Lord of the Rings, let's have giant spiders and all this, and that would really freak them out. So
Mm-hmm.
that can also have you help your story to go along because you learn your character so well. You can say, okay, let's throw them in this to have them a little bit uncomfortable here or here. Or let's have them, what's their biggest failure? You could say that, what do they feel that they failed at in life? And that can be something they're working towards. So, there's all sorts of things that and some of the stuff that if your character's favorite ice cream is Rocky Road, that may never come up, but you know it.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's true. And so, for example, you're talking about knowing your characters on a really deep personal level, like your Facebook friends, and you can see their profile page.
Yes.
So, but if you have a character, let's say you'd say, oh, their favorite ice cream flavor is vanilla. Does that mean they're a boring person? So it's almost like you're getting this rundown of who they are, why you like them, why you don't like them. Maybe they represent everything you don't like, and you've just created that. So really knowing your character on a personal level, I guess makes you come alive a little, makes them come alive a little more.
It makes them. It does. It makes them come alive because they feel real. You have to make your characters feel real, especially if you're in a fantasy, book, because you've got dragons and all this. There has to be something in there for you to connect with. And so those characters, that's why it's really important. If it's not a human character, if it's an elf or if it's a
fantasy,
whatever, a dwarf, or if it's a horse that talks, anything. But you have to make sure that that you have that connection, that you know it, so that somebody can go, I felt that way, or why would you have a favorite ice cream that's vanilla? Maybe it's because you can change it. Here's your vanilla ice cream, but you can put chocolate syrup on, or you can put strawberry, you can put this. Maybe that's why, because they like more variety, and that's just their base. So, you can grow from there. Yes, this is my favorite ice cream, but, this is why. So knowing the why is really important too.
Knowing the why, yes. Not what, but just why.
Yeah.
All right. Lots of good ideas. Wow, what a learning experience. So, we've talked about having a good mentor text, building a world full of multiple stories that maybe you don't tell right away, but they're out there, and then knowing your characters on a personal level, knowing everything about them. That doesn't mean all that stuff's going to end up in the story, but it helps you know them on a deeper level. Christy, I can't thank you enough for helping us out.
Thank you so much.
As you can see,
better?
yes, toughen it out, teachers. That Camp Tecumseh wore me out. Make sure you come into AwYeah Comics. Great mentor text here.
Yep.
Your next assignment on your DLD is going to involve you drafting your own fantasy story. So more on that coming up.